What's going on, everybody? Gentleman94 here. Welcome back to Ben Builds. This is day number 3 on the build for the 1939 KV-1. So today, let's recap real quick before we get going. This is our hull, basic hull. We got the sides on, the front and the back. We have done the suspension stops here, and we have the return rollers already hooked on here, and we have the drive sprocket. So now we're going to have to work on the rear of the engine decking, and that's going to be this part here. But there's a slight problem with this part, and that is that it's a wrong shape for an early 1939-1940 KV-1. Now there's a couple ways we can fix this. We can go out, like I said last episode, we can go out and we can buy a KV-2 big turret, and we can source parts out of that. But I don't want to do that. I don't want to spend $25. I checked the price online the other day. It's like $25 for that kit, and I don't want to buy a kit for 25 bucks and then take a bunch of parts out of it. I'll never be able to build the KV-1 big turret. So instead, we're going to operate and just work with what we have. I think that's the best course of action at this point. So let's go ahead and start assembling. A couple of parts here needs to go on the back before we can hook that rear engine deck. I'm not sure what this is. I'm going to say it's some sort of a heat shield or some sort of a protective covering for the reverse light. I don't know. It does come with, here in the kit, a photo-etched part that we can replace the plastic part with. Really not excited about working with that though, because you have to actually assemble the metal parts. And this is photo-etched brass. It's going to be very difficult to hook everything together. Very small parts. So I'm going to say we're not using that. We're going to use the plastic kit part instead. We might use other photo-etched parts, but for right now we're not going to use it for this section. Plus it's so low to the ground and it's the back of the tank. Hopefully no one will look back there and see it. So we'll just go ahead and use our flush cuts and cut this part off the tree. And we're going to have to clean it up a little bit. It's always important to go ahead and clean up your parts. I know I've said that last time and I'm kind of harping on it, but it's very important. You want to clean off any excess sprue, any flashing, any excess mold seams, mold lines, anything that does not belong on the part. You want to clean it off. Get it all nice and clean. We'll just use our razor blade here and just scrape the plastic and kind of get some of these sections off. There's no locating pins on this piece, it looks like. So that's not too bad. And we're going to have to fit this into the back of the hull. Right there. So a little more work there. We have to sand down the section. Let's get out our trusty handy dandy jeweler files. So now let's go ahead and attach that part. So we're just going to be placing this right there. And we've already put some glue down, so let's go ahead and press this in. That looks pretty good. Alright. Need a little bit more glue here on the top. I want to make sure this has a really good seam. So we'll drop a little bit of glue on the top here. You can use that capillary effect. And a little bit towards the bottom here on the underside. I gotta love this extra thin cement. It really flows well into any lines or openings. It's going to be great. Leave that to dry. And now let's turn our attention to the other part we have to put on, which is the underside of this engine decking. Plastic part is here. It's molded plastic right there. A bit of a curved shape to it. But there is a part in the photo etch that we could use actually. We don't have to build it. So I'm going to opt to use this brass photo etched screen that goes underneath the round engine decking that will give it a little bit of extra character. Now I don't think anyone will look back here and see it, but I'll know it's there, and I'll go ahead and kind of explain how to work with photo etch. Now I'm not an expert. There's other ways you could probably work with this stuff. This is brass. It's very thin metal, and it's molded and shaped and cut in shapes of parts that you need to replace. And here it's covered in a very thin layer of, looks like cellophane plastic. And this section right there is going to fit 3 locating tabs into the back of the hull and hook to the bottom of the engine deck. So let's go ahead and open this up. Just use this razor blade and just slice open some of this packaging. One thing I'll say about Trumpeter, I've never had one Trumpeter kit come with broken parts or bent photo etch or anything of that nature. It's always been very, very secure, very protected. So I got to thank Trumpeter for that. This is turning out to be a little bit of a chore, but better to be safe than sorry. There we go. Alright, so just pull off this plastic wrap here. Be very careful with photo-etch and with any sort of thin metal parts because they will bend. As you can see, they backed it with a very stiff piece of cardboard and they wrapped it in a very thick plastic wrap. So they really want to make sure that this does not break or bend. So I'm going to use my flush cuts and we're just going to clip this out of the mold. It's a good idea, whatever parts you don't use, go ahead and keep them. Don't throw them away. Put them in your spares box. Because you might be able to use that side flashing, the actual metal itself, for something totally different. I've used them several times for other projects, so it's a good idea to keep them. Just hold on to them on the side. And there's other parts you might want to use in later builds anyway. Okay, so we've got the part out. Let's go ahead and see how this looks here. This, of course, will fit in the 3 openings right there. Okay. Some raised rivet detail that we're going to need to go ahead and take off. But we're going to clean up this part a little bit here. Just remove any of the flashing, any metal burrs or anything. Go ahead and just clean these off. I'm going to use my flush cuts for that. I want to make sure that it's as clean as possible. We're going to have to remove some of this raised rivet detail off the bottom of the rear engine deck as well because this actually has it already molded on. Can't see it on camera because my camera isn't that detailed, but we're going to have to remove that. Just a couple of quick swipes on to take care of this. It's not very heavy detail, it's just a few very small rivets. So now let's go ahead and check out how it looks. Alright, so we're just test fitting this now. And that's the top part with that. Looks great. Looks good. So let's go ahead and pull this out. I noticed that the sides flare out a little bit. So let's go ahead and let's bend those back. To do that, we're going to need an adjustable crescent wrench. Just pinch the side with the wrench, use a little bit of leverage, and just slowly flex it until you can get it a little more where you want it to go. Okay, and that fits pretty well, so let's go ahead and give it some glue. Alright, that looks great. A little more glue on the side here. This is actually going to be worked on here, so we want to really make sure that we glue this down. The photo etch we're just going to tack in because we don't want to damage it during our heavy sanding we're going to have to do for this rear engine decking. So we're just going to tack that part in, but we really want to make sure that this top of the engine is attached and secured. Okay, so now that that is ready to go, it's dried more or less. Let's go ahead and dry fit this in here just to double check the shape of it. It's actually a little too flat. We're going to need to have a bit of a contour to it, a bit of a rounded profile, just a slight arc to it. So the good way to do that is to use something that's round and to just kind of bend it ever so slightly. It's real close. It's real close, but we just need a little bit of a bend to it, just a very slight bend. And let's see what I have in my toolkit to use. This will work. We're going to use a basic automatic pencil, and we're just going to use the smooth part of the pencil itself, and we're just going to use it as a roller and just kind of shape the part to the contour of the pencil. That'll give it a little bit of a curve, not too bad, not too over exaggerated. And then go ahead and test fit it here. Looks really good. Fits very well up in there. And let's remove that because we don't need it. To attach metal parts, you're not going to be able to use your regular model glue because it's not going to do anything. So what you're going to want to do is get yourself some super glue. This is Loctite super glue. And 3 dots on each of the tabs and we'll just fit those tabs down in the back. I'm just going to tack this in. There we go. Now again, we're just tacking it in. If it's going to come out, it's going to come out. But for right now, it gives us a good idea of how it's going to look and where we need to work on. So I got a little bit of side area sanded down. It looks pretty good. Now we have to focus our attention on the rear engine deck itself. And this is the big part. This is going to be the most time-consuming part of this build because the rear engine deck has a round profile to it. And that's actually incorrect for an early 1939 KV. It should actually have a flat spot to the very top of it. So there's a couple ways we can go about doing that. Like I said before, we can go out and buy a KV-2 Trumpeter big turret, or we can just use a sanding stick or a file and just file it down. I'm going to opt to go ahead and just file it down. So here we're using just our basic jeweler file, nothing too extravagant. This is a good way to work down very, very slowly. I suppose if you wanted to, you could use a sanding stick. If there's a lot of material that need to be removed, you could use a Dremel. I would be very leery of using a Dremel though, because if you use a Dremel, you might Dremel too much and leave a big notch out of the back of the engine decking, and you don't want to necessarily do that unless you're going for some sort of battle damaged look. And don't think you have to hold these. Don't think you have to hold the part. You can place the part on the ground, get a little more leverage behind it, and really be able to press down and really remove some of that material. Again, I'm just using a jeweler file here, nothing too extravagant, nothing too crazy. I want to get a basic shape before I go crazy and gouge up the plastic too much. There we go. It's looking actually pretty good. It's not going to take a whole lot of material to be removed, but we're going to have to get a little more aggressive with this, because with the jeweler file, it's going to take forever. So another way you can do this is to use a razor blade. And just draw the razor blade across it. Just draw it and just scrape the plastic off. This is a good way to get even more material off the back of the area. Just draw that razor blade right across, kind of scraping off that excess plastic. Once you're satisfied with that, you can go back to the jeweler file and you can just start removing little sections here and there. We're getting closer to where it's actually supposed to be. It's getting pretty close. It's a good idea to protect any of your raised detail that you're going to want to save. In this case, we're going to use just this basic piece of white cardboard that was used to back our photo etch. And this is a good idea to do if you're going to be working in a delicate area. Now we want to take off more material really than what we're taking off with the jeweler file or the razor blade. We're going to have to step it up in terms of protection for this raised detail. A good idea to do that is get this extra thick label making tape. This is usually used for the old school label makers. I don't know if they really have these anymore, but if you can get this kind of hard plastic tape, go ahead and try it out. You can also use the blue painter masking tape. That seems to work pretty well too, but you will wear through that. You won't wear through this. Now the reason we did this is because we're going to swap out and use an emery board that you would use maybe say to file down your fingernails or something of that nature. And this is a fairly coarse grit. It isn't too coarse, but it's fairly coarse, and it's going to take off a nice chunk of plastic, and we're going to use this and really press down and remove quite a bit of material. Once we're satisfied with that, we can come back with the basic jeweler file and go ahead and just remove any burrs, nicks, any overly aggressive strokes you may have done. And always go in one particular direction. Don't go crazy and do a bunch of different directions there. So that's looking pretty good. We're going to go ahead and file down a little bit more on the side. Really make sure that we've got everything covered here. And it's not a bad idea to go ahead and check and double check and triple check your work just to make sure that everything is where you want it. Because I hate to go back and redo things 3 or 4 times. Now I mentioned last episode that our turret sat a little high on the top of the hull. And this is our finished turret again here. As you can see, it sits a little high there. And I want it more like this. I don't know if you can really see that very well, but I want it to be a little lower to the hull. So to do that, we actually came up with a way to just remove that inner turret ring so that this actually fits a little lower onto the hull. The way I did that is just I took my X-Acto knife, number 11 blade, and I just shaved down sections right here. Just shave it down. So eventually it come out and it cut off that internal lip. This is our finished turret from last time. As you can see, I did a little more work on the back here. That seam is fairly well hidden. It looks pretty good. The seam under the gun, though, is a little bit prominent. I'm not sure if I can remove that or not, but we'll see. Hopefully it'll be hidden when the turret is placed on top of the hull. But overall, it's a good looking little turret. We have to work a little off camera, though, on the turret ring, because it's going to take a while to go ahead and get that all squared away and ready to go. But overall, it's looking pretty good. I gotta say, I'm very pleased. We did a lot of work here on the back of the engine. It took about 45 minutes to get this to be smooth. I didn't record all 45 minutes because that's just boring. A lot of sanding, resanding, touch up, sanding some more. But it's got a nice little flat profile to it now on the top. Hopefully you can see that. I've also worked a bit on the side and the round bottom section here. So far, we're looking pretty good. So I'll work a bit more off camera, but for now, we can call it a wrap on build day 3. Hope you join us for build day 4. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back soon.